That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we're going to go through and look at some undervalued running backs right now in fantasy football. Now, a couple of these players I never thought I'd be mentioning their names, but here we are. And I know a lot of people are probably wondering, Mason, why are we talking about underrated running backs in fantasy? It's April. Have you not been paying attention? We are drafting fantasy teams every single week on those live streams on Underdog Fantasy, where you can hop into best ball drafts. If you don't know what a best ball draft is, essentially you get into a real money fantasy draft now. Of course, I would keep it lower stakes, have some fun with it, and you don't submit your starting lineup during the season, and the automatic best starting lineup submitted for you throughout the year. And that way, I personally am going to hop into over 200 of them. I would advise you to just hop into a couple, just have some fun with it. But nonetheless, I've been having a ton of fun with that. And if you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You will, on top of that, get access to a month-long trial period of our premium locals content, including extra live streams, including our 2022 rankings, including our dynasty ranking. There's so much stuff going on over there. And also, you get our in-depth dynasty research book, over 100 pages of quality information to help you for your 2022 season, to help you understand rookie value, to help you understand so much. But I think that should be it. Please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, letting me know how stupid I am. And that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into this. And our first running back, he headlined every one of our videos last year when I said, do not draft player X, must avoid running backs. I understand that people are probably going to not like me bringing his name up, but Nick Chubb. Now with Nick Chubb here, we have our long history, but the past is the past. We need to look at the 2022 season. We need to look at the situation that Nick Chubb is in. And I think the overall market is just changing their mind with Nick Chubb. And I will be the first person to admit, yes, he is in a committee. 100%. That's why I hated him last year. That's why we were drafting Joe Mixon over him last year. But with Nick Chubb, this can potentially change. Now, let me pull this up right now just to fill some people in case you don't know. But if we're looking at this Kareem Hunt contract, he signed that extension 2 years ago for that $12 million deal. And as it stands, Kareem Hunt has $6 million owed this year, and a whopping 0% of that is guaranteed. Now, this could open the door for a couple different things. A, if the Cleveland Browns went, you know what, we just spent so much money on Deshaun Watson. We may need to get out of this situation. And they look at Dearness Johnson and say, hey, Dearness Johnson, you did a hell of a job when you had opportunity last year. They could maybe just say, hey, let's use 3-down bell cow Nick Chubb, and let's throw in Dearness Johnson as that secondary RB. That's probably not going to happen. But what could happen is they could think that they had enough from Dearness Johnson last year to look at Kareem Hunt turning 27 this upcoming season, looking at that $6 million hit that he is going to take to their cap, and look to ship him off potentially to a different team to recoup some of the draft capital they may have lost with the Deshaun Watson deal. Of course, they're not getting anything close to a first-round selection, but they could go out there, they could get a pick in return, get the $6 million off their books, get Dearness Johnson to come in and be the running back too, and bada boom, bada bang, Nick Chubb's the top 3 running back in fantasy. It would happen overnight. Now, I will say that's probably unlikely. We have to acknowledge that. Remember on our Dynasty channel, I was saying to avoid DK Metcalf at the beginning of the offseason because there was a possibility that Russell Wilson would be out of Seattle. I didn't say it was likely, but I said it was in the range of outcomes, and we had to account for it. Very similar situation here with Kareem Hunt. Unlikely that he goes to a different team other than the Cleveland Browns, but it is in the range of outcomes, and it is something that should at least be discussed. Now, the more important thing that I am looking at with Nick Chubb is just a change in overall sentiment that drafters had from last year to this season. And in my opinion, his situation just got a hell of a lot better. Because if we look at this offensive line he's running behind, this is still an elite unit. Now, of course, in 2020, they were the number 1 graded offensive line out in the NFL, and that has fallen a bit since that time. Now, they're not necessarily the cream of the crop. They're not necessarily that number 1 team overall, but they're still easily in the discussion to be a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, which really makes it very appealing to draft someone like Nick Chubb. And this was discussed a ton last year, and I don't hear anything about it this season. Now, we need to continue to stack these things, figure out what's in favor of Nick Chubb. And the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking at is the overall offensive environment changing. Now, yes, this team may not necessarily be nearly as run heavy this upcoming season as they were previously. This team may not look to be running the ball over half the amount of times that they snap the ball, but still, that's not necessarily going to hurt them, because what we are going to find with Deshaun Watson coming over to Cleveland is this team is going to finally be able to sustain drives, and this team is going to be an elite offense, specifically in getting to the red zone. Now, if we look at Nick Chubb over the past 3 seasons, very consistent finishes. He was the running back 10 on a per game basis, 2019, the running back 7 in 2020, the running back 11 in 2021. So that's consistent. But what's even more consistent than this is if we look at his usage in this offense. He had 16 and a half carries this past season. He had about 16 the year before that, and 18 and a half in 2019. That 2019 year definitely skewed because, remember, you had Kareem Hunt serving a suspension for the first half of the season, and Nick Chubb was a prototypical workhorse running back. I mean, was an elite option with no Kareem Hunt in this offense. Well, if we look at the usage in the receiving game as well, this is why I was not drafting Nick Chubb last year, because in 2020, Nick Chubb only had a target and a half a game. This past season, that didn't really change. Almost 2 targets a game, but less than 2 targets a game. In 2019, that number's at 3, but very deceiving because the first half of the season, Nick Chubb was getting used a ton in the receiving game. The second Kareem Hunt stepped in, he was just a first and second down option. Now, that has remained the exact same as we've always seen. And now we look at his total yards. He has gone over 100 total yards every single year over the past 3. That is ridiculous. And all 3 of those measures with his volume, I am going to project to stay relatively the same this upcoming season, outside of Kareem Hunt potentially getting moved to a new team. Now, like I said, it's not likely. It's in the range of outcomes, but we shouldn't be drafting Nick Chubb here just because we think Kareem Hunt can get moved. Why I am personally going to be drafting Nick Chubb is I think we can see his touchdown rate go through the roof. He had 0.75 touchdowns per game this past year. Kareem Hunt vultured a decent amount of those in the red zone. If you actually look at the touchdown rate for Kareem Hunt versus Nick Chubb on a per touch basis, it's not sustainable for Kareem Hunt to continue to get that volume, specifically in the red zone. I'd imagine, given the big body that Nick Chubb has, that's going to naturally just trend a little bit more in Nick Chubb's direction this upcoming season. We saw Nick Chubb score a touchdown a game back in 2020. He scored half a touchdown a game in 2019. But most importantly, why I am personally expecting that Nick Chubb's overall touchdown volume is going to dramatically rise is the change in the offensive environment that we previously discussed. Over the past 3 seasons, the Cleveland Browns have yet to crack the top 16 with overall points scored. They have yet to crack the top 16 teams with overall points scored over the past 3 years. At best, they've been an NFL average offense. Now, with Deshaun Watson coming over, we saw what Deshaun Watson did in Houston with a horrible offensive line, with Bill O'Brien as his head coach. With Watson coming over, I think we can automatically assume that he is going to succeed. And I understand Watson, he may be serving a suspension. But what I have discussed previously is that suspension, I would mark it almost as a 0.0% chance that he serves a year-long suspension, that he serves a suspension longer than 8+ games. And the reason for this is I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. I don't know any NFL owners. I'm not in those NFL owners meetings. I sadly don't have Roger Goodell's number. Trust me, I wish that I did. But you know who does? You know who checks every single one of those boxes? The Cleveland Browns owner. He knows lawyers. He has probably some of the best lawyers on the planet. He can speak directly with Roger Goodell, and he can speak with every other NFL owner. And he has access to all those resources to figure out what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. And with all that knowledge, he decided to get into the bidding war on Deshaun Watson to pay more for any player in NFL history in trade. He went out there and sent 3 first-round picks to get him. And then on top of that, he gave him more guaranteed money than we have ever seen to an NFL quarterback, and it's not even close. $80 million more than the next highest guaranteed contract that we've ever had, and that was this offseason with Aaron Rodgers. So based on the information that he has and the actions that he has taken, I am going to assume Watson's in the clear. Watson's playing this upcoming season. And that's going to elevate this overall offense to bring them to finally be that top 10 team. And if you place Nick Chubb, a running back with this talent behind this offensive line, and you make it where all of a sudden his offense, while yes, maybe the run to pass ratio isn't exactly the same, they're going to have sustained drives, way more plays overall. They're probably going to push the pace of play slightly and significantly more trips to the red zone, which equals more touchdown opportunities. I'm all in. And I know some people are going to say, oh, well, Watson, still not good for Chubb because they're going to turn into a passing team. If you look at what Deshaun Watson has done for running backs throughout his NFL career, the past 3 running backs that were the starting options on the Houston Texans that Watson's played with, David Johnson in 2020. This isn't prime David Johnson. This is washed David Johnson, who had a yards per carry of 4.7. And then the next season, with no Deshaun Watson, that fell to 3.4. Then Carlos Hyde had a yards per carry. Washed Carlos Hyde at this point of his career. A yards per carry of 4.4 behind a horrible Houston Texans offensive line. That was the second highest mark of his NFL career. Lamar Miller, yards per carry, 4.6 behind a horrible Houston Texans offensive line. And then he suffers a significant injury and never makes it back to an NFL roster. Watson has a history of elevating washed running backs and making them viable options, making them efficient. And now you're placing them behind an elite offensive line with an elite running back. I hated Nick Chubb last year, but he's in a much better situation and he's cheaper. He's currently going as the running back 11 in these underdog drafts. I just took him in the middle of the second round in one of our previous live streams. Now, speaking of someone I just took in that same live stream, I actually got this running back in the 3rd round, despite if you check out his ADP on Underdog, you can consistently draft him in the 4th or sometimes even the 5th round. It's going to be Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette has an ADP of running back 15, and this is coming off a finish where he had the running back 5 overall spot locked up last season. Now, I understand there's been a lot happening in Tampa. I live in Tampa. I'll say that. I've gone through the saga. Tom Brady retiring, Tom Brady coming back. But now we have to view this offense where they finished 2nd in the NFL last year in points scored. Tampa finished 2nd in the NFL with points scored. I don't really think this is that much of a hot take, but I would say that there's no way in hell they're finishing top 3 in the NFL in scoring again. I'd assume the loss of Bruce Arians. I'd assume the loss of Antonio Brown. I'd assume Tom Brady being yet again another year older is probably going to move this team down from, instead of being the 2nd overall scoring team, to probably closer to the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. We can agree they're a top 10 offense. Can we all get on that same page? And here with Leonard Fournette, what I love to see, is the fact that this production was not primarily driven through touchdowns. While yes, he did average 0.7 touchdowns per game in Tampa, still, when they got to the red zone, Tom Brady was dropping back at a crazy rate, to the point where it looked like they were just stat padding, to the point where it looked like they wanted to get Tom Brady as many career passing touchdowns as they possibly could, and they probably should do that knowing Tom Brady's legacy. But here, if we're projecting forward, Leonard Fournette's a very safe option. This is a running back that had 6 targets a game last year and almost 13 carries a game as well. That's where the majority of his production in a PPR format actually came from, was the receiving usage that he had, which is not going to change even if this offense gets slightly worse from where it was last year. And even if this offense gets slightly worse from where it was last year, we don't necessarily have to assume that Leonard Fournette all of a sudden is going to fall off a cliff. Because if we go through, I don't really want to look at the 2020 statistics for Leonard Fournette. Obviously, it was a very weird season. He gets added to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster. I mean, right before the season kicks off, we know playoff Lenny, he takes over, they win the Super Bowl. But what I really want to pull up is that 2019 season that we have from Leonard Fournette, because this was his final season with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Clearly one of the worst teams, one of the worst franchises ever in the NFL. And here, the offense was a bottom 10 offense with their overall points scored. Leonard Fournette only scored 0.2 touchdowns per game this season, but still managed to finish as a top 10 running back. And the reason for this is volume, volume, volume. You know, that's my favorite word. You know, that's my favorite thing to chase. Here, he had 17.5 carries a game, almost 7 targets a game at the same time, and over 111 total yards. That is ridiculous. I think it is almost guaranteed for Leonard Fournette to see similar volume to that season this upcoming year based on the change in this backfield. They no longer have Ronald Jones. I mean, I don't think they have Giovanni Bernard either. Even if they do, who the hell cares? What's Gio 34 at this point? I have no idea. Of course, we're exaggerating there. But nonetheless, you have an empty backfield. You have Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn with the assumption that Fournette is just going to maintain his same role. He is an exciting running back in fantasy when he's going as the running back 15, going as a running back 2 when he was just the top 5 option. Now, add on the fact that you have Ronald Jones going to Kansas City. You have no Antonio Brown, so we can assume that Leonard Fournette is going to get a bump up in the receiving game, maybe to 7 targets a game this upcoming season. Even if the overall offense takes a step back, even if his touchdowns per game go down, he still has a ton of room to work with. Now, our next running back, someone that, if you are new to the channel, I have to give a disclaimer. I came out and I said, sell high, sell high, sell high, sell high. Pretty much every single week, this running back put up a fantastic performance. And we were wrong every single week. I had to come out with that next video and say, oh my God, how is he still doing this? James Conner. Now with James Conner, the reason we were looking to sell this past season at the beginning of the year before the Chase Edmonds injury was because the workload just didn't make sense. James Conner was a running back that averaged 1.2 touchdowns per game last year. 1.2 touchdowns per game. That is a mark that is 100% unsustainable. That number is most likely going to come down to what we saw similar to Leonard Fournette last year. That number is most likely going to come down to about 0.6, 0.7 touchdowns per game. There's just no way in hell that a running back, no matter the offense they're playing in, no matter, the talent that they are, it's so hard to project a running back for that kind of touchdown volume, especially considering Kyler Murray's tendency to vulture those rushing touchdowns at the goal line. Now, why I was saying to sell high on James Conner halfway through last year, and now I am higher than consensus on James Conner, is simply the departure of Chase Edmonds. If you look at this offense, this backfield, with and without Chase Edmonds, it couldn't be a bigger difference. Here, with Chase Edmonds, the workload for James Conner was laughable. He averaged about 10.5 carries a game, which is completely fine. I'm fine, 10.5 carries a game. I'm advocating for drafting Leonard Fournette, who Leonard Fournette averaged about 12.5. But what was laughable about this is over the 9-game stretch, including the playoffs, that James Conner played with Chase Edmonds, he averaged 0.78 targets per game. He did not hit a single target per game, which in a PPR format, you just can't get away with that. When other running backs like Leonard Fournette are going out there catching 5 balls for 45 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in a single performance, good luck making up on those 15 points. You literally have to average over a touchdown a game just to keep up with those running backs that can catch balls. But we know that James Conner has it in his range of outcomes. He has the talent to be used in the receiving game. The issue was Chase Edmonds. The issue was not James Conner. Now, we actually got a sneak peek of what James Conner looks like in this Arizona Cardinals offense without Chase Edmonds. And that was a 6-game stretch. I'm including the game where Chase Edmonds went out with an injury because, I think that Chase Edmonds had like 1 carry for 3 yards. He was out of that 49ers game like that. But if we look at this time period, the carries per game go from 10.5 to 16.5. Massive bump up. But what is way more important, James Conner was not able to average a single target per game with Chase Edmonds in this lineup over that 9-game sample. However, you remove Chase Edmonds, about 5.5 targets a game for James Conner, and he caught pretty much every single one. I mean, I could have used receptions and he would have been over 5 receptions a game before not even averaging a target. And this is sustainable, in my opinion. And the reason for this is we got to go in a time machine. We got to go back to 2018 when we saw James Conner be used as a feature down running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In that season in particular, what is so funny is James Conner's carries per game and his targets per game damn near identical to what we saw in Arizona without Chase Edmonds. That season had 16.53 carries per game for James Conner compared to that 16.67 without Chase Edmonds in this offense. Targets per game, 5.46 compared to 5.33. We've seen that workload throughout an entire season before. So with James Conner, I promise you, there's damn near a 0% chance that he is going to average 1.2 touchdowns yet again this upcoming season. But that is not to say you can't draft him, because the departure of Chase Edmonds to Miami is going to open up that role in the receiving game. I do not expect Eno Benjamin to be able to capture all of that work. I'm expecting it to go to James Conner, especially looking at the contract that he just received. Right now on Underdog, you can draft James Conner as the running back 21. He was a top 5 option pretty much every single week with no Chase Edmonds. I'm not ranking him as a top 5 option, but I think he's a running back you can comfortably draft ahead of ADP and like the floor and ceiling combination that you were going to have. Now, of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock, checking out the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, letting me know how stupid I am. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. But more importantly, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK. When you use promo code FLOCK, you get all those great bonuses that we talked about at the beginning of the video, and you can get into those drafts with us on the live streams. Thank you again. Hope you have a great day. Hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.